Cursed Library, another 8-tier dungeon. I love the design of the library. The boss side could be kind of annoying, but you get a Vitality and a Wisdom pot, and you also have a second boss you can go into. The Scholar Seal is quite an interesting white bag. The Corruption Cutter, not as much, but I like the Scholar Seal a lot. And I will not pass up the opportunity to go into a Cursed Library because Wisdom and Vitality are the two least sought after stats to max. They're usually the last two that you max out these days because they're harder to find, arguably, than Life and Mana, given how many dungeons you can access that have Life and Mana, that there aren't many dungeons that provide you Vitality and Wisdom, and this dungeon provides both, which is why I like it a lot. Layer Shaitan, bottom D tier, has kind of the same principles as Secluded Thicket, where the boss is just so incredibly dangerous, and it doesn't give anything good. The Skull of Endless Torment, I think, is just not very viable. The Crossing Fire's Wakizashi is good. And Staff of Eruption, I mean, only if you care about getting the SD set. But otherwise, you're doing all this just for an attack pot, which I don't think is that necessary. It's just too dangerous of a dungeon, and it doesn't give you nearly as many valuable drops for you to want to do them. I skip Layer Shaitan unless there's an event going on, and even then I probably don't go into them just because he doesn't even drop a mark anyway, so it's not like you have to do this dungeon. In fact, I find Shaitan to be more dangerous than Secluded Thicket, and therefore makes it even less desirable. Another thing, it's not dangerous in the sense that you need to be very exceptionally skilled at dodging to avoid him. No, he has also invulnerability phases that are purely meant to stall for time, and they're not easy to deal with either. So I just don't like this dungeon. Even after it got reworked, it's just not a very good dungeon in general. Manor of Immortals. I'll put it I'll put it at the bottom of B tier just because it has the same kind of problem as Woodland Labyrinth and Forest Maze, where while it's a pretty interesting dungeon to go through, and I do love Puri a lot, and attack pots they're quite common and plentiful in Manor. To get to the boss, while it is quite simple, you just have to align yourself to the point where you have to travel straight up, right? Because to approach Ruthven, you have to travel up a very long hallway. So the goal to get to Ruthven is quite simple, just like on Dead Lair. But there are so many things confusing or slowing you that it just makes it so tedious to get through. Which is why I put it at the bottom of B tier, just because it's meant to purposefully impede your progress for no reason other than to impede your progress. Magic Woods? I'll put below Cursed Library. It has kind of the same principle as Cursed Library where it can drop 2 potions, but unlike Cursed Library, actually no, let me put this here. Unlike the Cursed Library and Mad Lab, it doesn't yield the most interesting white bags out there. We have that Spirit Staff, which is okay. It's like a slightly weaker regular Cosmic Staff, I guess. But I still go through it, just because Magic Woods is an easy dungeon to get through very quick. Doesn't take you too much effort. It's about the same length as a Sprite World, but it's just, not that valuable. And you can probably go through more Sprite Worlds and Snake Pits than you would a Magic Woods, but since you can get 2 pots in this dungeon, I immediately rank it higher than Sprite World and Snake Pit. And I like the aesthetic of it. It's a nice and pleasing dungeon to go through. It feels like it'll be a place that I feel like I would go to and, just relax and maybe have lunch or go for a walk. It is nice scenery. Ocean Trench. A similar concept to Sea Depths and Parasite. You'll notice I put all the mana dungeons pretty close to each other. Coral Blow is not as valuable as it used to be before. It was pretty much you had to swap it out with the Debo and that's all you would use. Now not so much. Sea Trap is still very valuable. The Sea Silk is nice. The Coral Ring sucks. The boss fight I think is quite nice. I think it's relatively short and sweet, and it's threatening. It's alarming if you're not careful, but it's also a pretty easy boss fight to go through. That social drops decent loot. The path to get to the boss is a little annoying, which is why I don't put this dungeon as high up as the likes of others, because it's just once again, the water mechanic is purely meant to deter you from getting to the boss. I don't think it's as properly implemented in terms of its mechanics in Ocean Trench as it is in Nidarian Reef, which I'll get to in a bit. But it is still a pretty good dungeon. I definitely would not miss a chance to go into an Ocean Trench. Cultists Hideout. Put it at top B tier. Okay. 9 times out of 10, there's a trickster or a rogue rushing to get to the 5 bosses, right? So you don't even care about the rest of the dungeon. The cult has a similar problem with Laud, where you need to pay attention, otherwise you're gonna die. But the bosses are just so unremarkable because all they do is just shoot their elemental shots. And you have to do that like 3 times over. And then they summon this random dude in the middle that you just kill very quickly. I find this boss to be very tedious and unremarkable because there's nothing about it that actively engages me other than they're shooting things at you and therefore you need to dodge it. I know that's every boss in Realm, but half the time I feel like you're just only going to Cultists Hideout either to get a vial or to get the cultist drops. Like, it has great drops, right? Staff of Unholy Sacrifice, while it is a really hard item to use, is extremely beneficial. The Skull, great. Ritual Robe, insanely powerful. Bloodshed Ring, a very good defensive ring, so they have good drops, right? But I just don't like the boss fight. I much prefer to go into a Void and Marble Colossus just because not only do you have 2 chances for loot, but the boss fights are just more engaging there. Versus Cultists Hideout, it just feels like you have to dodge because you just have to dodge. The boss just says you have to dodge, otherwise you're gonna die. It's my least favorite Lost Halls dungeon for sure. Davy Jones's Locker. I'm putting it in A tier only because of the fact that I need it so much. I love Davy Jones' Locker just purely because of the fact that there are so many Davy quests in the Tinker for no apparent reason other than just because there is. And therefore, I love to see Davy lockers because I can never have too many Davy marks. I burn through them too quickly. Aside from that though, the Ghostly Prism is a strong prism. The Spirit Dagger, it's okay. It's like the Mad Lab robe for the Dagger class, where it's like, it's there to just be a side grade from the Foul Malevolence Dagger, but otherwise, you know, it's okay, right? But you can get the Swashbuckler Sickle and the Naval Uniform, I believe, from this dungeon. Plus, there's often a chance to find 2 or even 3 treasure rooms in the dungeon, which gives you multiple chances for loot, and I do like that. The Swashbuckler Sickle and Naval Uniform, I think, is the 2 better parts of the Pirate King set, so I'll give it points to that. And it gives you a Wisdom Potion, and I believe Davy Jones' Locker can give you an Attack Potion as well. I'm gonna check really quick. Yeah, you can get Attack Potion as well. More importantly, you can get 2 pieces of the Phantom Archer set, widely believed to be the strongest SC set in the game. So therefore, yeah, there's just a lot of good stuff you can get from a Davy, and generally players really enjoy this dungeon because it's a pretty straightforward dungeon, and I like the mechanic. You gotta find all these keys to find the real captain, but just the stuff that you get from it is so valuable, including the mark. I actually find the mark to be the most valuable, and yeah, just overall it's a solid dungeon. I like it a lot. It's one of my favorites. Mostly because I have like a masochistic relationship with this dungeon, but that's just me. Anyway, moving on. Puppet Master Encore, we'll put it, I think I'm leaning more towards bottom of A tier. I like the dungeon just purely because of the boss fight. It has Jack for loot and drops. I love the dungeon for the boss fight, kind of for the same reasons that Haze has, that he mentions in his videos. Haze being Talwar or Bikiri Box 12. I just like it in terms of like the boss battle, but otherwise, actually no. If I only like it for the boss, I'd put it probably at the bottom of B tier instead. Otherwise, it's that dungeon that you only go to if you just want to have a good time, right? It doesn't give you that anything too valuable. And it also just rarely gives you anything at all. So, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, even the boss fight is kind of tedious. I'll put it at the top of C tier. I don't think it's a terrible dungeon, I just think that you only go into it if you want to have a little bit of fun. But yeah. Nidarian Reef. Now this is basically a better version of the it's a better version of the Puppet Master's Encore. In fact, I'll probably put it up here. I think Nidarian Reef employs a better dynamic with the underwater like oxygen like air level thing than Ocean Trench because you're stuck in an enclosed area and the only air pockets that are available to you, that are accessible to you, are right next to the boss, meaning you have to choose to put yourself in certain danger to get your air in. It's like a catch-22. It's like if you don't want to be too close to the boss, you will suffocate and drown. On the other hand, if you want to stay fully oxygenated or whatever, then you need to put yourself in harm's way to do so, which I think is a great mechanic. It forces players to act decisively and to be able to perform under pressure. And I like the boss design as a whole. I think it's a pretty interesting one. It could be kind of annoying at times because of how like you have to just all the dazing and stuff that happens, but otherwise it's pretty good. And you can get potions from a lot of the little tiny jellyfish Nidarian things as well as the big boss. Not to mention, while I don't think the white bags are too great, they have their uses. And I have yet to get either of them, but I don't do as many nidarian reefs just because the danger level is a lot higher for this dungeon. But it has a similar property to a cemetery where you have chance to get a lot of different potions. And so therefore it isn't a dungeon I think you should pass up. But I believe that if we wanted to make this dungeon more appealing, is to have some sort of like ST set equipped. Like, why not an aquatic ST set? That's something I actually wondered. I think what would make the Ocean Trench and Nidarian Reef more appealing is that since there's 2 underwater themed dungeons, why are there no underwater themed like ST sets? I'm trying to figure out, is there actually one? Let me check. Let's see, so we got, okay, we do have the Slurp Sky and Wizard, which I guess is supposed to be like an underwater thing, but it's not a dungeon exclusive set. Yeah, there are no underwater related sets, no like Mermaid Archer. Like why are there no Mermaid Archer sets? Do we even have an Archer? Yeah, we have the Phantom Archer, which I just covered. But yeah, something like adding an ST set for this dungeon would make both of them very appealing to go through. Okay, Snake Pit or Spider Den. Put it here just because it's a slightly harder pirate cave, and that's about it. No opinion on it too much. Mountain Temple. It is just not a very rewarding dungeon. I like the theme behind it. Actually, I'll put it a little bit higher just because I do like the aesthetic of the dungeon quite a bit. But the boss fight is kind of annoying. Once again, Daichi has a lot of phases that just are purely meant to stall for time, and they're not very practical. His white bag drops are good, Orb of Aether and Wand of the Fallen, and the what's it called? The Akuma Slayer set is nice. It's a pretty cool set, I think. But otherwise, it's just not very practical to go through these dungeons because they just don't give you too much loot. I might put it a little bit higher up. Let's put it here. But yeah, not really a dungeon I would prioritize. Okay, Hive. Put it above just because it does give you a chance to get some decent UT drops. Like you can get an orb and a scepter and a chance for deck spot. I think it's a cool dungeon. I think I'll leave it there. But I haven't done too many hives when they came out, just because by then I was already a very experienced player, so I didn't see a reason to go through one. Shatters, top of B tier, where it's similar to Cultists Hideout in the dungeon's length does not come from how difficult the bosses and dungeons are, but because of the fact that the dungeon is just so long. In terms of you have to go through the switches, you have to open the gates, the bosses have like tons of invulnerability phases that are just purely meant to be annoying and to stall for time. That I just don't find any of the 3 bosses to be engaging, and the enemies are difficult in Shatters, but not for a good reason. It's not like a how do I say, what's an enemy that's difficult but also like rewarding to go, like for instance like the Tormented Golem or whatever, the one that drops Golem Garments. It's a hard like enemy to go through, but it gives you something good, and it's there to like, it can be avoided if need be, but you can also like go through the effort of taking it out. The enemies there are just meant to make things take longer. I just don't like how all the mages and adepts spawn these ice portals and ice spheres and stuff like that just to bog your experience. I just think the Shatters is not, it gives very valuable whites, only I have a really bad habit of always getting the gemstone and not a bracer and crown. But it's just, I just don't really go into Shatters because it's just not as, the rewards are so inconsistent, and in most cases non-existent, to the point where I just don't think it's worthwhile going into. It's my least favorite epic dungeon to farm for that reason. Void. My favorite dungeon in the game. The drops you can get could be terrible, but the Void as a whole I think is one of those dungeons where it's so satisfying to beat. Even to this day, after doing several like hundreds of Voids, I feel good getting to the end. It epitomizes the end game for Realm of the Mad God. There's a lot of things in there that can kill you. If you aren't paying attention, you are going to die. You need proper coordination and DPS and equal distribution of players on the 4 platforms. It is a dungeon perfectly suited for organized raids. And I think obviously the potential loot you can get, T14 armors, T13 weapons, and the very, very coveted white bags, are what makes the Void worth getting into. Not only that, even if you get a P-back, you get 50 fame from the boss. Forget like just the Marble Colossus like end drops and stuff like that. The Void itself can give you 50 fame on its own. And I love the mechanics behind it. I love how you can be really intuitive with whether or not if you want to distribute evenly among the 4 platforms, or if you want to stack up in one platform. there's just a lot of aspects to it that I think are quite engaging. It puts the pressure on your party to act quickly, otherwise the dungeon gets harder and harder and harder. And just overall, yeah, I think it's a really good dungeon. Prior to Lost Halls 2.0, I think Void 1.0 wasn't nearly as good. I actually haven't done enough Void 1.0s to draw a conclusion to that, but Void 2.0 is definitely one of my favorite boss fights in the game because its difficulty is appropriate. And the rewards can be insane, especially if you get the Omni Ring. Tomb of the Ancients, I'll put it at the probably slightly below Fungal Cavern actually. It's a very valuable dungeon. You can get a lot of stuff from it. Life pots, which are always helpful. Dungeons, the bosses can be exploited in a way where if you want to take out only one at a time for a clean tomb, or super dirty tombs, which is what most people do these days. You get some good rings. You can get the Pyramid Ring, which is I think the only good ring, and the other two rings kind of suck. And then the other white bags like Tome of Holy Protection or whatever, the Prot, as well as the new tome, the new white bag Pharaoh's Requiem loot, which is also a really good one. And yeah, it's a pretty solid dungeon. It is annoying having to just get all the T-Sarks and the regular Sarks before you can activate the bosses, but otherwise it's, I think, a dungeon that has withstood the test of time a lot better and has kept up in terms of, like, it still matches the value of a bunch of newer dungeons such as the Parasite Chambers as well as, like, you know, the Nest and stuff. Toxic Sewers, I'll put it in the same level as Demon Abyss, where sure, you can get some decent drops, slightly better drops than what you would get in Demon Abyss, like Murky Toxin and Void Blade, which is not the most practical katana in the game, but it has its benefits. As well as, I think the Toxic Sewers drops the other half of the Acidified Assassin set. Let me just check. Yes, it does drop the other half of the Acidified Assassin set, as well as the Slurp Slime Green Knight, or whatever, the Slurp Knight, yeah. I still have yet to get a Slurp Knight, and I really want one. So it has better drops than, I would say, Abyss of Demons, but it is the most tedious dungeon in the game to go through because of Sick. I still don't know to this day why Sick is 100% heal reduction. Why can't it just be like 50% heal reduction? Because all it does is prevent you from getting to the boss quickly. And not in a way that like the enemies are challenging or you can get caught in a bunch of dead ends. No, it is just there to slow you down, literally slow you down. And that's why I don't like sewers that much, unless it's a public one in like Nexus and a bunch of people are in it and someone is rushing it. Cave of 1,000 Treasures I put at probably at the mid of B tier because of how infrequently you see one. And even though it is supposed to be a cave of 1,000 treasures, it doesn't give that much of like, it doesn't give you that remarkable of any drop actually. In fact, I think the only thing it gives you that's of value are just rainbow potions. An idea I had for this dungeon is to make it so that it has the potential to drop a white bag from any of the Godland dungeons. As in, it can drop a Demon Blade, it can drop a Murky Toxin, it could drop a Plague Poison, it could drop a Doom Bow, it could drop a Staff of Extreme Prejudice, it could drop a Wand of the Bulwark. Like, I think that'd be cool. I think that'd be pretty fitting, given that it's a very rare dungeon, and it is, like the name states, that it is a very, very valuable dungeon. Cave of 1,000 Treasures. I just feel like it would make more thematic sense for it to drop a bunch of different drops that come from every single dungeon. Mind you, it's going to need to be a lot lower of a drop rate since it could drop a whole bunch of them, but I think it would just give players a bigger incentive to go in there other than just getting the mark for the effigy that they have to turn in for the quests for Tinkerer. Lost Halls, I'm gonna just count this as Lost Halls Marble Colossus and not Lost Halls for the Cult. I'll put that at S because it is a difficult dungeon that could be potentially quite long, but the rewards you get are very beneficial. Plus, you can get a lot of fame from this dungeon. A full clear void could get you upwards of well over 100 fame per run. The drops that you get from the Golem Trickster set are very good. The Rusty Cuffs is nice. The Golem Garment is nice. It's probably one of the best light armors in the game. Brain of the Golem is extremely valuable for bosses, and the Carved Golem Remains is okay. It's not bad. It's just okay. So you can get some decent drops on the way there. But Marble Colossus can drop some very, very powerful white bags, and it always guarantees an attack and defense spot. So given how difficult the boss is, I actually would think Marble Colossus is harder than Void. Not necessarily because of coordination, but more just because there's a lot more stuff that can kill you. But like otherwise, you could still get some very powerful loot. The Sword of the Colossus is one of the highest damaging swords in the game. Marble Seal, extremely valuable for taking on these higher level dungeons that give you less space to dodge attacks, and sometimes you just need to straight up face tank everything, the Breastplate of New Life is one of the best defensive armors in the game. And the Lodestone, even though people joke about Potato being the worst of the 4 white bags, has its benefits. It has the same offensive capability as a Forgotten Crown. Having 6 speed and 6 defense is not that bad either. I still consider Lost Halls to be one of my favorite dungeons, not necessarily because of the fact that it's fun, but because it's just such a rewarding dungeon to go through. And that's how I get a lot of fame on my characters too. Donnas Garden. I don't do her enough. That came out wrong. I don't do Donnas Garden enough to form a proper opinion on it, but from what I remember, it's similar to like the Puppet Master's Encore in both like dungeon layout and boss fight design, as well as drops. The only reason you would go into Belladonna is to pick up like the skins, the pet skins and stuff like that. In terms of the Perennial Cranium and the Hanagasaku, I think both of them are bad. I'm pretty sure both of them are bad, or like mediocre. So I'll put her in the same level as Shaitan and Secluded Thicket, in the sense that it's just really hard for how little reward you get from it. Last but not least, Nest, another S tier dungeon. Dangerous, very dangerous dungeon, but the amount of drops you can get from this dungeon is astounding. You can get a bunch of Behemoth armors, you can get a bunch of Apiary armors, you can get a lot of dex pots, not just from the boss itself, but from the Behemoths that you find or the Soldier Bees throughout the dungeon. You can get greater dex pots, you can get life potions, and you can also get the Queen Stinger's Dagger, which is okay, and the Hive Master Helm, which is fantastic. The boss is intense and dangerous, but easy to do if you know what to do, and if the party members know what to do. It's not tediously long as the likes of a Shatters, but it ironically provides better rewards than the Shatters, and so therefore I put it up at S tier. You'll notice that the dungeons I put in S tier are ones that reward you with a lot of stuff proportionate to either the dungeon length or difficulty. So that's why I don't have too many dungeons up in S tier, and I have a lot of dungeons in C tier and B tier. But that's just because I think in order for a dungeon to be good in Realm, it has to be a dungeon that you would actively go out of your way to complete. And for these 5 dungeons, I would definitely do that. Okay, so this is my first time making a tier list video, so if I'm, maybe I might be a little bit, maybe I'm like more overly critical of dungeons that are like too far low, and like there might be dungeons that are too far high. But I've never done this before, so perhaps if I give it a closer look and like maybe through editing, I might decide, okay, Wood Lab is a little bit more valuable, but I'm just gonna bear with me, you know? I'll get better at it later. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know that there might be a lot of you who have different opinions on this. I'm sure some people would rate a lot of these lower dungeons much higher and vice versa. But this is just meant to be a dungeon tier list off of my opinion on what dungeons I think are nice and enjoyable, alongside whether they give good or bad drops, and which ones I think are just bad. I actually had quite a bit of fun making this video. I'm looking right now at the post-production on the Audacity length, and it's over an hour, so this will be fun to edit. But I hope you guys enjoyed. The next tier list I do, if you want to request a specific tier list, feel free to in the comment section below. I figure whichever gets the most upvotes, I will go ahead and do next. But yeah, that's it. If you enjoyed, a rating would be much appreciated, and please subscribe for more Realm of the Mad God content. But for now, thank you for watching, guys, and I hope to see you again soon in the next video. Take care.